In the vast expanse of the galaxy, countless worlds thrived in peace and prosperity. The stars were home to different races, each with its own culture, technology, and dreams. But that all changed when a mysterious alien force, known as the Ravagers, appeared without warning. Their arrival was swift and deadly. No one knew where they came from or what they truly wanted, but their impact was felt across the galaxy. At first, the Ravagers seemed like a distant threat, something that only the most advanced civilizations would have to worry about. But soon, it became clear that their power was beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. Their ships, sleek and terrifying, moved through space like shadows, silently destroying everything in their path. They didn't care about negotiations, about treaties, or about the many lives they were destroying. Entire planets were wiped out in the blink of an eye, their cities reduced to dust, their people forgotten. The most shocking part was how easily they conquered. The galaxy had always prided itself on its advanced technology and powerful fleets, but nothing seemed to stop the Ravagers. Their weapons were more advanced, their tactics more ruthless, and their desire for domination more unyielding. The once proud and powerful civilizations of the galaxy were helpless in the face of this new overwhelming force. The galaxy's leaders, desperate to find a way to stop the Ravagers, turned to each other for help. Diplomatic meetings were held, but they were always the same. Each species blamed the other for the invasion, and no one was willing to share their most advanced technologies. Without cooperation, the Ravagers continued their march across the galaxy, leaving death and destruction in their wake. One by one, the once thriving planets fell. The sound of battles filled the air, but they were always brief. The Ravagers, with their unyielding strength, crushed every attempt at resistance. Civilizations that had lived for millennia were gone in an instant, their people left to perish in the wreckage of their homes. The survivors were few and far between, scattered across the galaxy with nowhere to turn. As the galaxy plunged deeper into despair, a message was sent out into the vastness of space. It was a call for help, a plea for anyone who could save them. The message echoed through the stars, reaching every corner of the galaxy. But there was no response. The once united galaxy was now fractured, each race too afraid to risk their own survival by helping others. Even the most powerful species seemed unwilling to fight for a cause that might already be lost. Back on Earth, the news of the galactic disaster reached the ears of humanity. For years, Earth had been seen as a small, insignificant planet, largely ignored by the greater galaxy. Earth's technology was primitive compared to the advanced civilizations around them. And yet, humanity had always found a way to survive. They had faced great challenges before, from wars and disasters to economic collapse. But this was different. The entire galaxy was in peril. Despite their small size, Earth's leaders knew that humanity had something that no one else had the will to fight. For centuries, humans had been overlooked, laughed at, and underestimated. But this time, humanity's strength was its very determination. Earth's scientists and engineers worked tirelessly to develop new technologies, hoping to give humanity a chance against the Ravagers. Earth's diplomats sent messages to every surviving species, offering help, offering an alliance. But the galaxy was too scared, too fractured to trust humanity. Yet, despite all the odds, humanity refused to give up. They understood the stakes better than anyone. If they didn't act, the galaxy would be lost forever. With determination in their hearts, the leaders of Earth made the bold decision to fight. They would not sit idly by while the Ravagers destroyed everything. Even if the galaxy wouldn't help, humanity would help itself. The first human ships, equipped with newly designed weapons and technology, were launched into space. They didn't have the most advanced fleets, but they had something that made them stand out: resilience. Earth's ships were smaller, faster, and more agile than anything the Ravagers had seen. The humans had something else as well: a desire to protect their homes, their families, and their future. They were willing to fight, even when all hope seemed lost. The Ravagers, who had thought of humans as nothing more than an afterthought, didn't even notice the human fleet as it moved through space. The humans were unknown to them, and that was exactly what gave them an advantage. The Ravagers underestimated the small, seemingly insignificant species, thinking that Earth would never be able to make a difference. But the humans knew better. The time for waiting was over. They would not let the Ravagers win. Earth's fleet moved steadily forward, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The call for help had been sent, and now humanity would answer it. As the human ships moved closer to the heart of the galaxy, one thing was certain: the war had just begun. And humanity, for the first time in galactic history, was ready to show the universe what they were truly capable of. As the last remnants of the galaxy's once powerful civilizations fell, Earth's leaders gathered in secret. The news of the Ravagers' devastation had spread far and wide, but most of the galaxy had given up. Planets burned, species were wiped out, and no one seemed capable of stopping the relentless enemy. Still, on Earth, there was a quiet determination, an unspoken resolve to not just survive, but to fight back. Humanity, often seen as small and insignificant by the galactic powers, had been left to fend for themselves. While the rest of the galaxy hid in fear, Earth's leaders made a bold decision. They would not run. They would stand up and fight. If no one else would answer the call, then humanity would rise and make its own place among the stars. Earth's scientists, engineers, and military leaders worked day and night. They began developing new weapons and technologies, using every bit of knowledge at their disposal to create something that could stand up to the Ravagers. The humans knew that their chances were slim, but they were used to overcoming impossible odds. Over the years, they had faced wars, famine, and other disasters, always finding a way to survive. This time would be no different. A fleet of human ships, armed with experimental technology, was constructed. They were smaller and more agile than the Ravagers' mighty warships, but they were packed with advanced weaponry designed to disable and destroy the enemy's massive fleet. Earth's ships were also built to be stealthy, able to slip through the shadows of space without being detected by the Ravagers' powerful sensors. It was a risky plan, but it was the only chance they had. Despite the challenges, Earth's diplomats reached out to the few surviving civilizations. They knew that the key to victory was unity. The galaxy's broken species needed to come together, if only for a short time, to have any hope of defeating the Ravagers. Messages were sent, pleading for help, for any race willing to join humanity in the fight for survival. Most of the galaxy had given up, but there were a few scattered worlds still willing to listen. One of those planets was Valora, a world that had seen its fair share of hardship. The Valorians, once a proud and powerful race, had suffered greatly at the hands of the Ravagers. Their cities had been destroyed, and their people scattered across the stars. However, unlike many of the other species, the Valorians were not ready to give up. They had long been a warrior race, skilled in both strategy and combat, and their leaders knew that they could not simply sit back and watch as their civilization disappeared. When Earth's message reached Valora, the planet's leaders held a council. They had seen their world fall apart, their technology and fleets destroyed, but they had not yet lost all hope. The humans were not the strongest, nor the most advanced, but they were something the Valorians respected, determined and fearless. After much discussion, the Valorians made their decision. They would join humanity in the fight against the Ravagers. It was a risky move, but it was the only option they had left. When the Valorians sent their response, it was the first sign of unity the galaxy had seen in years. Humanity and Valora, two worlds that had once been strangers, were now allies in the struggle to save the galaxy. The humans and Valorians shared knowledge and resources, their combined forces creating a fleet that was greater than the sum of its parts. Together, they trained and prepared for what would be their most dangerous battle yet. Meanwhile, Earth's leaders continued to push forward with their plans. They sent out more messages, hoping that other civilizations would follow Valora's example. And slowly, bit by bit, other species began to answer the call. A few planets, devastated but not defeated, sent their fleets to join the humans and Valorians. The tide of battle had turned slightly, but there was still much work to be done. The first human fleet, led by Admiral Elena Pierce, was ready. Their destination was the planet Valora, where they would meet the Valorians and begin their first major battle together. It was not a large force, but it was united, and in the face of overwhelming odds, unity was their greatest strength. The humans knew they couldn't win alone, but together with the Valorians and the others who had joined them, they would stand a chance. As Earth's fleet entered space, the crew felt a mixture of fear and excitement. The vast unknown lay ahead, and no one knew what the Ravagers would throw at them. But the humans were determined. They had come to the edge of the galaxy, driven by one simple truth: they would not be the ones to fall. The Ravagers had taken so much from the galaxy already, but they would not take Earth's hope. Admiral Pierce stood at the helm of the flagship, staring out at the stars ahead. She knew the journey would be perilous, but she also knew that this was the moment that would define humanity's future. The galaxy had lost its way, and it was up to Earth to show them how to fight, how to stand together, and how to survive. As the human fleet approached Valora, the tension was thick in the air. It was a turning point in the war, a moment that could either change everything or end in disaster. But one thing was certain: humanity had taken the first step, and now the galaxy would see what they were truly capable of. The Ravagers would learn that there was more to this galaxy than they had ever imagined. The call had been answered, and now it was time for humanity to show that even in the face of destruction, hope could still be found. The human fleet arrived in the Valoran system, a place that had once been a symbol of strength and beauty in the galaxy. Now it was a shadow of its former self, its cities reduced to ruins, its once vibrant skies dimmed by the aftermath of the Ravagers' wrath. The Valorians, though battered, still held a fierce pride in their hearts, determined to defend what remained of their world. Admiral Elena Pierce stood on the command deck of her flagship, the Perseverance. Her crew was ready, but the unknowns ahead loomed large. The Ravagers were a mystery to most of the galaxy, a terror that seemed unstoppable. Humanity and Valora had barely begun to unite their forces, but there was no turning back now. They had come too far. The first sight of the Ravagers' fleet was enough to chill anyone to the bone. Their ships were unlike anything the humans or Valorians had ever seen, massive blackened hulks that seemed to absorb the very light around them. They moved like predators in the dark, and it was clear from the start that they were not here to negotiate. "They're waiting for us," Commander Lucas, the Valorian fleet leader, said in a low voice. His sharp blue eyes scanned the screen, watching the Ravagers' ships hover in the distance. The Valorians were experienced warriors, but even they could not shake the feeling of dread that swept through their ranks. Admiral Pierce nodded. "And we're going to show them they've made a mistake." The plan was simple, though dangerous. The human fleet would take the lead, using their stealth technology to slip through the Ravagers' defenses and strike at their weaker points. The Valorians, with their superior combat skills and advanced weapons, would provide the muscle, following up with a coordinated attack once the Ravagers were caught off guard. But as they moved closer, it became clear that the Ravagers were prepared. They had anticipated this. Their fleet seemed almost endless, stretching far beyond what the humans had thought possible. And as the human ships drew nearer, a wave of cold dread washed over them. The Ravagers did not just want to defeat them, they wanted to break them. The battle began in an instant. The Ravagers fired first, unleashing waves of energy weapons that tore through the void like lightning. The human ships, small and fast, dodged the initial blasts, using their agility to stay out of range. Yet, despite their speed, the Ravagers' weapons were powerful. The humans had only moments to act before the Ravagers would destroy them. Admiral Pierce's voice rang out across the communication channels. "All ships, engage. Stay close, stay coordinated." The human ships weaved through the Ravagers' fire, launching their own missiles and energy blasts. For the first time in the galaxy's long struggle, the Ravagers encountered resistance they hadn't expected. The humans' agility made them harder targets than the Ravagers had anticipated. Even as they took damage, their fleet continued to press forward, determined to show the enemy they were not so easily beaten. The Valorians, with their fierce battle tactics, moved in alongside the humans, their ships cutting through the Ravagers' defenses with precision. The Ravagers were thrown off balance as the combined forces of humanity and Valora attacked from multiple directions. Still, the Ravagers' ships were massive and heavily armored. They didn't falter easily, and their counterattacks were relentless. As the battle raged on, Admiral Pierce's mind raced. They couldn't afford to keep fighting this way for much longer. The Ravagers had the numbers and the strength to wear them down. But the humans had something the Ravagers couldn't predict: determination. As long as they had even a single ship left, they would keep fighting. "Commander Lucas," Admiral Pierce said, her voice steady but urgent. "It's time. We need to deploy the experimental weapon." Lucas hesitated, his eyes scanning the battle ahead. "Are you sure? If this doesn't work—" "It will work," she interrupted. "We have no other choice. Fire when ready." The weapon, still untested in real combat, was humanity's last hope. It was a powerful energy pulse, designed to disable the Ravagers' ships without destroying them. If it worked, it would give them the opening they needed to land a decisive blow. If it failed, they would be left with nothing. Lucas nodded and gave the order. Moments later, a blinding flash erupted from the human fleet, sending a shockwave through the battlefield. The pulse hit the nearest Ravager ship, and for a split second, the Ravager vessel flickered, its systems shutting down. The entire Ravager fleet seemed to pause, their ships momentarily stunned by the unexpected attack. It was enough. The Valorian ships charged forward, unleashing their full arsenal. With the Ravagers' shields weakened, the combined forces of humanity and Valora began to break through. One by one, the Ravager ships began to fall. It was far from a complete victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. Admiral Pierce's heart raced as she watched the chaos unfold. They had done it. They had made the Ravagers hesitate. For the first time, the galaxy had a glimpse of hope. The Ravagers, though far from defeated, began to retreat, pulling back into the deeper reaches of space. It was not the end of the war, but it was a sign that the enemy could be beaten. Humanity and Valora had proven something important today. They would not go down without a fight. "We've just started," Pierce said, her voice filled with resolve. "This is just the beginning." As the human and Valorian fleets watched the Ravagers vanish into the distance, a new sense of unity and determination filled the hearts of the survivors. The galaxy was far from safe, but they now knew that hope was not lost. And that, in itself, was a victory. The victory over the Ravagers at Valora had sent a ripple of hope through the galaxy. For the first time in years, people were beginning to believe that the enemy could be defeated. The combined human and Valorian fleet had successfully pushed the Ravagers back, but the cost had been high. Many ships had been damaged, and countless lives were lost in the battle. Yet, despite the pain and sorrow, the survivors knew that this was only the beginning. Admiral Elena Pierce stood on the bridge of the Perseverance, staring at the stars ahead. The battle was over, but the war was far from won. The Ravagers would not stop, and neither would humanity. She had seen the fear in the eyes of her crew, but she had also seen something more important: determination. They would not back down. "Status report," Admiral Pierce said, her voice calm but firm. Commander Lucas, the Valorian fleet leader, stepped forward. His people had fought bravely alongside the humans, and the bond between the two species had grown stronger with each passing moment. "We've sustained significant damage, Admiral," Lucas reported, "but our ships are still functional. The Ravagers' retreat was unexpected, and we've gained valuable intelligence from the wreckage of their fleet." "Good," Pierce replied. "We need to use that information. It's the only way we'll know how to fight them next time." The battle at Valora had been a critical turning point, but there was no time to rest. The Ravagers were not known for their mercy, and they would return, more powerful and better prepared. Humanity and their new allies had made a powerful statement, but they needed to act quickly to build on that momentum. In the days that followed, Earth's leaders met with representatives from Valora and the other species that had begun to answer the call. There was a new sense of unity among them, one that had been absent for so long. For the first time in decades, they had hoped that the galaxy could be saved, and they were willing to work together to make it happen. "We need to hit them before they regroup," Admiral Pierce said during one of the strategy meetings. "If we wait too long, they'll become stronger. We need to strike when they're vulnerable." The Council agreed. It was a risky move, but it was their only chance. The Ravagers had made the mistake of underestimating the combined forces of humanity and Valora once before. They wouldn't make the same mistake again. The first step was to form a new alliance of worlds, a coalition that would stand united against the Ravagers. The human fleet would serve as the backbone of the alliance, supported by Valorian forces and other races that had been affected by the Ravagers' attacks. Each species brought something unique to the table. The Valorians with their tactical brilliance, the humans with their adaptability and innovation, and the others with their resources and knowledge. Together, they would have a fighting chance. But building the alliance wasn't easy. Many species had been devastated by the Ravagers, and trust was a rare commodity. Some worlds were reluctant to join, unsure if they could rely on others to fight alongside them. Others were afraid that the Ravagers would seek revenge on any planet that chose to resist. Yet, slowly but surely, the coalition began to grow. Each new ally brought new strength to the cause, and each victory, no matter how small, brought them closer to their ultimate goal: defeating the Ravagers and restoring peace to the galaxy. As the coalition's forces prepared for the next stage of the war, Earth's military scientists worked tirelessly to develop new technologies and weapons. They studied the data they had gathered from the Ravagers' ships and began to find weaknesses in their designs. With each breakthrough, they grew more confident that they could turn the tide in their favor. Admiral Pierce stood with her senior officers in the war room, looking at the holographic map of the galaxy. The Ravagers' fleet was scattered, but they had regrouped in a distant system, one that was heavily defended. The next battle would be their most difficult yet. "We know where they are," Pierce said, pointing to the map. "But getting to them will be a challenge. We need to strike fast and hard before they have a chance to prepare." Commander Lucas nodded. "We've fought side by side, and we know what the Ravagers are capable of. But we're not going in alone. We have the strength of the entire coalition behind us." The plan was set. The human fleet, now reinforced with new technologies and fresh allies, would make a coordinated assault on the Ravagers' stronghold. It was a dangerous mission, but it was necessary. The Ravagers had to be stopped before they could regroup and launch another devastating attack on the galaxy. As the coalition's fleet gathered in the vast emptiness of space, a sense of unity filled the air. They were no longer just individual species, fighting for their own survival. They were a force united in a common cause. And with that unity came strength. Admiral Pierce's voice rang out across the comms. "This is it. The final push. We fight for the future of the galaxy. We fight for everyone who has fallen. We fight for hope." The fleet surged forward, ready to face whatever the Ravagers would throw at them. The battle ahead would test their resolve, but they had come too far to turn back now. The galaxy had suffered for too long, and humanity, along with its new allies, would show the Ravagers that their reign of terror was coming to an end. The stars ahead sparkled with the promise of what was to come. The war was far from over, but the road to victory had already begun. And no one, no matter how powerful the enemy, would stand in their way. The day of the final assault had come. The coalition fleet, now a united force of humans, Valorians, and their new allies, gathered at the edge of Ravager space. Their objective was clear: destroy the Ravagers' stronghold and break their hold over the galaxy. It was a task that seemed impossible, but after the victories they had already achieved, no one doubted that it could be done. Admiral Elena Pierce stood on the bridge of the Perseverance, looking at the stars ahead. The war had taken a toll on everyone, but there was something different in the air now. A sense of unity, a sense of purpose. The galaxy had been torn apart, but humanity and its allies had come together to restore hope. The Ravagers had underestimated them, and now they would pay the price. "Admiral, the fleet is ready," Commander Lucas reported, his voice steady. The Valorians had proven themselves time and again, and Lucas had become a trusted leader in this new alliance. Pierce nodded. "Let's move out. No more waiting. We have the advantage now. It's time to finish this." The plan was a daring one. The Coalition fleet would launch a simultaneous attack on the Ravagers' stronghold. The humans, with their advanced stealth technology, would slip past the outer defenses and strike at the heart of the Ravager fleet. Meanwhile, the Valorians and their allies would engage the Ravager ships in open battle, drawing their attention away from the stealth attack. As the fleet moved forward, the vast emptiness of space seemed to swallow them whole. The Ravager stronghold, a massive fortress in the heart of their territory, loomed in the distance. Its defenses were powerful, but the Coalition fleet had come prepared. The moment they engaged, the fate of the galaxy would be decided. The first shots rang out. The Ravagers, caught off guard by the sudden attack, retaliated quickly. The Coalition ships, though outnumbered, were faster and more agile. The humans, with their adaptable combat tactics, fought with precision, exploiting every weakness in the Ravagers' defenses. Admiral Pierce's voice was calm but firm as she gave the orders. "Focus on their command ships. We need to cripple their leadership." The battle was fierce, with explosions lighting up the dark void of space. Each Coalition ship fought with everything they had, knowing that the survival of their worlds depended on this one fight. The Valorians, with their superior battle strategies, were a crucial part of the plan. Their ships cut through the Ravager ranks, engaging them head-on and causing chaos in the enemy's formation. But despite the intensity of the assault, the Ravagers were not easy to defeat. Their ships were massive, heavily armored, and designed to withstand even the most powerful attacks. For every Ravager ship that fell, two more seemed to take its place. Admiral Pierce watched as the battle unfolded before her. The odds were against them, but she had seen the courage of her crew, the strength of their new allies. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for something much more important, a future. "We need to buy some time," Pierce said, her eyes scanning the battlefield. "Launch the secondary wave." The secondary wave, a series of small, fast ships equipped with powerful EMP devices, was humanity's secret weapon. They would fly deep into the Ravager formation, disabling their ship systems long enough to give the Coalition fleet a decisive edge. It was a risky move, but it was their only chance. The small ships streaked across the battlefield, dodging incoming fire and weaving through the Ravager fleet. The EMP devices went off in rapid succession, sending waves of destruction through the Ravager ships. The massive warships staggered, their weapons offline, their shields flickering. "Now's our chance," Commander Lucas shouted. The Valorians launched their final assault, unleashing their full arsenal of weapons. The Ravagers, reeling from the EMP strikes, struggled to fight back. The Coalition ships pressed forward, taking advantage of the opening. Admiral Pierce's heart raced as she watched the battle unfold. This was it. This was the moment they had been fighting for. The Ravagers' stronghold was within their reach, and the Coalition was finally gaining ground. But just as victory seemed within reach, a new wave of Ravager ships appeared, seemingly out of nowhere. These ships were different, sleeker, faster, and more deadly. The Ravagers had been hiding their true strength, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The new Ravager ships launched a massive counterattack, their weapons firing with terrifying precision. The Coalition fleet was caught off guard, and for a moment, it seemed like the tide of battle had turned against them. "Hold steady," Admiral Pierce barked. "We're not finished yet. Push forward." The battle raged on, the stakes higher than ever. The Ravagers, though powerful, had underestimated the resolve of the coalition. Humanity had faced impossible odds before, and they had always found a way to fight back. This time would be no different. As the coalition forces rallied, Admiral Pierce's thoughts turned to Earth, to the families, the children, the innocent people who had suffered so much at the hands of the Ravagers. She fought for them. She fought for the future. The final moments of the battle were a blur of chaos and determination. The Ravagers' stronghold was nearly within reach, but even as the coalition pressed forward, it was clear that this would be a battle like no other. The Ravagers had one last card to play, and they were not going down without a fight. "Stay focused." Pierce's voice rang out across the comms. "We fight for everyone who has fallen, and for those who will rise." And with that, the final push began. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, and only one side would emerge victorious. The battle for the Ravager stronghold reached a critical moment. The coalition fleet had pushed forward, but they were met with fierce resistance from the Ravagers' newly revealed forces. These ships were unlike any the humans or Valorians had faced before, sleek, fast, and heavily armed. The Ravagers had saved their best for last, and they were fighting with everything they had. Admiral Elena Pierce's eyes scanned the battlefield, her mind racing. The odds were stacked against them. The Ravagers were relentless, and their forces were overwhelming. But Pierce had led her crew through impossible situations before. This was no different. She could see the determination in the eyes of her officers and crew. They had come too far to give up now. "Commander Lucas," Pierce said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "We need to focus on their command ships, take them down, and the rest will follow." Commander Lucas, who had proven himself as a skilled leader in battle, nodded without hesitation. "Understood, Admiral. We'll move in on the Ravager flagships." The Valorian fleet surged forward, their ships darting in and out of the Ravager formation, striking fast and hard. The Ravagers retaliated, their weapons lighting up the darkness of space with deadly precision. The battle was intense, and both sides were taking heavy losses. But the coalition was not willing to back down. They fought for their homes, for their families, and for a future free from the Ravager threat. The Perseverance dodged incoming fire as it advanced toward the heart of the Ravager fleet. Pierce could see the flagship in the distance, its massive form looming over the battlefield. It was heavily shielded, and its weapons were formidable. But she had no doubt that they could find a way through. The humans had always been resourceful, and they had learned from every battle. "Launch the stealth drones," Pierce ordered. "We need to find a way past their shields." The stealth drones, small and fast, were equipped with advanced cloaking technology. They would slip through the Ravager defenses and gather vital information on the flagship's weak points. It was a risky move, but it was the only chance they had to penetrate the Ravager's formidable shield. As the drones deployed, the crew of the Perseverance held their breath. The battle raged on around them, but in those few moments of silence, every person on board knew that this could be their last chance. They couldn't afford to fail. Minutes later, the drones returned with valuable data. The Ravager flagship's shields were indeed strong, but there was a small gap in the defensive grid, a weakness that could be exploited. It wasn't much, but it was enough. "Target the weak point," Pierce commanded. "All ships, focus your fire on that location." The coalition fleet changed tactics. Every ship, every weapon, was aimed at the vulnerable section of the Ravager flagship. The first wave of fire lit up the darkness, and for a moment, it seemed as though nothing had happened. But then, a massive explosion tore through the flagship's defenses. The gap in the shields had been breached. "Hit them again," Pierce shouted. The second wave of fire struck the same point with devastating force. This time, the flagship's shields failed completely. The Ravager ship's hull groaned under the strain, and a shockwave spread outward as the ship's engines exploded. The flagship was no more. The Ravagers, seeing their command ship fall, began to lose their focus. The coalition fleet pressed forward, striking at every target with renewed strength. The Valorians, in particular, were relentless. They had been fighting the Ravagers for centuries, and this battle felt personal. They fought with the fury of a people who had lost everything, and their vengeance was swift and brutal. Despite their losses, the Ravagers were still dangerous. They had powerful reinforcements, and their ships fought with a desperation that could not be ignored. But the coalition fleet was no longer just fighting to survive. They were fighting to win. Admiral Pierce watched as the Ravager fleet began to retreat. It was a slow process, but the momentum had shifted. The Ravagers, realizing that their flagship was gone and their forces were crumbling, started to pull back. But it wasn't over yet. The coalition couldn't let them escape. They had to end it once and for all. "Don't let them escape," Pierce ordered. "We finish this here." The final phase of the battle began. The coalition fleet, now bolstered by their victory, pushed forward with everything they had. The Ravagers, though formidable, were no longer the unstoppable force they had once been. The fleet that had once ruled the galaxy was now in full retreat, their forces in disarray. The Perseverance led the charge, cutting through the Ravager fleet with ease. Their remaining ships were no match for the combined strength of the coalition. The Ravagers' hold on the galaxy was slipping, and they knew it, but they wouldn't go down without a fight. Admiral Pierce watched as the last of the Ravager ships were destroyed. It had taken everything they had, but they had done it. The Ravagers were defeated, and the galaxy was free. The battle was over. The Ravager threat had been eradicated, and humanity, along with their allies, had emerged victorious. The price had been high, but the galaxy had been saved. As the dust settled, and the coalition fleet regrouped, Admiral Pierce allowed herself a moment of quiet. The war was over, and humanity had proven that they would not be easily defeated. The galaxy had faced its darkest hour, but now, for the first time in years, there was light on the horizon. There was hope, and that hope would guide them as they rebuilt and moved forward, stronger than ever before. The future was theirs to shape. The battle had ended. The once feared Ravager fleet had been shattered, their stronghold destroyed, and their empire crumbled. Across the galaxy, the news spread quickly. The Ravagers were no more, and peace had been restored. Yet for Admiral Elena Pierce and her crew, this victory was bittersweet. The cost had been high. The scars of war ran deep, and many had been lost along the way. But there was something else, something that lingered in the air. Hope. The hope that they had fought for, the hope that had driven them to victory, was now a light shining brightly on the horizon. The coalition, once a scattered group of different species, had proven that unity could overcome even the greatest of threats. And now, with the Ravagers defeated, it was time to rebuild. Pierce stood on the observation deck of the Perseverance, gazing out at the vast expanse of space. The stars sparkled like tiny beacons of light in the darkness, reminding her of all the lives that had been lost and the countless lives that had been saved. There was so much work to be done. The galaxy would not heal overnight, but for the first time in years, the future seemed possible again. Commander Lucas approached, his steps quiet on the deck. He had been by her side through every battle, every loss, and every victory. He knew the weight she carried. "You did it," Lucas said, his voice calm but full of respect. "We all did." Pierce didn't turn to face him immediately. She let his words settle before responding. "It's not over yet. There's still so much to do." Lucas nodded. "But we've proven that we can do it. We've proven that we can stand together and win." She finally turned to him, her face tired but resolute. "Yes, but rebuilding isn't easy. There's no going back to the way things were." The war had changed them all. It had forged new alliances, tested old friendships, and forced them to adapt to an ever-changing battlefield. But through it all, they had remained strong. They had learned to rely on each other, to trust each other, and to fight for something greater than themselves. "We'll rebuild," Lucas said, his tone firm. "And we'll make sure that what happened to us never happens again." Admiral Pierce smiled faintly. "You're right. We'll rebuild, and we'll make sure that peace endures." The coalition fleet, now free of the Ravager threat, began to regroup. The Valorians, the humans, and their other allies worked side by side to salvage what was left of their ships, repair the damage, and restore communication with the various planets and colonies that had been affected by the war. It was a monumental task, but the unity they had forged in battle gave them the strength to face whatever came next. As the days passed, more ships arrived from the outer colonies, bringing supplies, medical aid, and people eager to rebuild their homes. The war had taken its toll, but the resilience of those who survived was undeniable. There was a sense of optimism now, something that had been absent for far too long. On Earth, a new council was formed, representing the different species and cultures that had joined in the fight against the Ravagers. It was a council born from the ashes of war, a council built on the foundation of trust, cooperation, and mutual respect. They would work together to ensure that the galaxy would never again face such a dark time. But for now, it was time for peace. The war was over, and the people of the galaxy could finally begin to heal. Admiral Pierce stood in front of a crowd of her fellow officers, her eyes scanning the faces of those who had fought beside her. There was still a long road ahead, but the first steps toward a better future had already been taken. She cleared her throat and stepped forward, her voice strong as she addressed the crowd. "Today, we stand as one. We fought for each other, and we won. The Ravagers are gone, and the galaxy is free. But the true victory lies in the unity we've built, the bonds we've forged. We have shown that, no matter the odds, when we stand together, nothing can break us." A cheer rose from the crowd, and for the first time in a long while, there was no fear in the air. There was only hope. Hope for a future where the galaxy would no longer live in the shadow of tyranny. Hope for a future where peace and cooperation would reign. Pierce's thoughts turned to Earth, to the people she had sworn to protect. They had been through so much, yet they had never given up. They had fought for freedom, for justice, and for the promise of a better tomorrow. And now, with the Ravagers gone, that promise was within reach. As the days turned into weeks, the rebuilding began in earnest. New technologies were developed, new alliances were formed, and the people of the galaxy worked together to restore what had been lost. The scars of war would never fully fade, but the galaxy was healing, and with each passing day, the future grew brighter. Admiral Pierce watched as the first new ships were launched from Earth's orbit, a symbol of their renewed strength and hope. They were not just ships. They were a message to the universe. Humanity had risen from the ashes, and they were ready to build a new future, one of peace and prosperity. And as the stars twinkled in the distance, Pierce knew that they had truly begun a new chapter, a chapter filled with hope, unity, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. The battle had been won, but the journey had just begun.